Great. This is the May 16th, 2022 Personnel Committee meeting of the Legislative Council. We had taken up business that was in executive session earlier this morning, and we are now continuing. This is the May 16th, 2022 Personnel Committee meeting of the Legislative. And we are now continuing with the remainder of our agenda. The first item is Law and Legislative Reference Library Director Recruitment. Ms. Gresser, are you covering this portion here?
Yes, on page 10, I believe.
Okay, it has the overview of the draft recruitment plan and job advertisement for Personnel Committee review. This begins on page 10 of the packet. Any questions for Ms. Gresser or any amendments to the proposed plan? I presume this is pretty consistent with other positions. Yeah.
Yes, we base this on the most recent recruitments for other director positions. The one question that we had for you was the interview team is going to consist of the executive director, the HR director, a couple of other directors, some law librarian staff, some law library staff. And we didn't know if there were other individuals that you would like to be included in the interview and the resume review team. So for example, if you thought that the clerk or the secretary or someone in the caucus offices, or whether you were comfortable just having us do that.
Yeah, I think personally, I think who you've outlined is I would trust to do a good job vetting and interviewing the candidates. So I don't personally see a need for any additional folks. Anyone else? No. Great. Well, I would seek a motion to approve the plan as outlined. So moved by President Jackson.
Second.
Second by Representative Dillingham. Any discussion? Classic. Cats love computers when you're zooming. All those in favor? There we go. Cat tails up as well. That's 4 votes, I think. The plan is approved. The next item on the agenda is item number 6, harassment prevention training for upcoming legislative session, page 11. And this, there are several options outlined for the 2022-2023 mandatory harassment prevention training. Okay. Yep. Okay. So there are 4 options here. National Conference of State Legislatures, NCSL is willing to partner with us to provide the general harassment and sexual harassment portions of the training, but are unable to provide the racial harassment training content. NCSL has experience providing harassment prevention training to other state legislatures and is well known as a bipartisan information source. There may be some reasonable fee for their time and expenses, particularly if travel is required. Another option is Brand and Isaacson Law Firm. Peter Lowe and Hannah Wargraft are willing to co-present and provide training that would cover general harassment, sexual harassment, and racial harassment. Peter and Hannah have extensive experience with employment law. Going to admit the AV. With employment law representing employers at the Maine Human Rights Commission and presenting harassment prevention training content to Maine employers and organizations. This could be the most expensive option depending on how many trainings are offered and how they are scheduled. The other item here is the Maine Human Rights Commission. Amy Sneerson, Executive Director of the Maine Human Rights Commission, is willing to develop and provide training that would cover general harassment, sexual harassment, and racial harassment. There may be some reasonable fee for related expenses. And then finally, Healthy Androscoggin. Lindsay Gannon has experience presenting on the topic of cultural competencies for and to various audiences, including the Maine Judicial Branch, Family Division Guardian ad litem, and the Attorney General's Office on the topic of cultural competencies. The Cultural Competencies Workshop she created is focused on implicit bias for the purpose of educating the community in support of new Mainers. The training does not specifically include the legal or policy aspects of harassment. A fee would be charged for providing the trainings. So it sounds like there are two options that actually include the full breadth of, I think, what the training has covered in the past. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. The NCSL does not include racial harassment, and the Healthy Androscoggin does not include the legal or policy stuff. So the Brand and Isaacson and the Human Rights Commission would cover general harassment, racial harassment, and sexual harassment. So those two, I mean, if we went with NCSL, we would have to get another provider to provide the racial harassment piece.
My thoughts is that's what I would support. I will not be supporting the others.
Supporting either Brand and Isaacson, and no,
No.
supporting NCSL.
I would support the NCSL training and then looking for a different avenue to just cover the racial harassment piece, to bring in an individual to cover just that.
Okay. Suzanne, would it be, does Healthy Androscoggin include racial harassment?
Let me ask Jackie. I know you had spoken with Ms. Gannon.
Yes, so the cultural competencies workshop is not specifically racial harassment or discrimination. It is providing information to various individuals on understanding cultures and implicit bias and such, but not specifically harassment or discrimination, which are more of the legal or policy kind of terms.
I
So could we do NCSL and the Maine Human Rights Commission? Could they co-present? Since Amy could clearly cover racial harassment. If NCSL covered the general harassment and sexual harassment, and then Amy was a co-presenter to do racial harassment.
We could certainly ask if they would be willing to do that.
Okay. I mean, that would, I think it'd be a lot easier to not have two different trainings. I mean, if they could do, knowing how difficult it is to get everyone to actually complete these trainings, I think it'd be helpful to actually have them all presented at once. I agree that NCSL is probably a good source because I think they are obviously well respected and would be able to bring probably some folks to the table that that we may not have access to in the confines of the Maine context. But I would be remiss to think that we would be able to convince people to go attend two different trainings. So, yeah, Representative Dillingham.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I think both Senator Jackson and you, Speaker Fecteau, probably have experienced the same sort of complaints, maybe not, but that I have experienced, and I know that Ms. Gresser and Ms. Little have received those complaints as well over our training in the past. I think it's important, however we set this training up, that it is presented as informational rather than somebody who is passing judgment on the legislators or individuals that are participating in this training. And I know myself, this past training, I think was handled very well by the individual from the AG's office, very factual, without kind of maybe a personal intent behind it. The previous training before that one was absolutely offensive. I don't think it met what the criteria that we had established. I left and I had a conversation actually with Ms. Gresser after the many questions that I felt were never covered. And I stepped out of that training not feeling any more educated than I was going in. And I think we have to be very cognizant of when we're talking about these discussions, they already have kind of a heated nature around them. And we know that just from our experience when we talk about legislation around these pieces of these issues, how heated our debate can be on the floor, and it's instant. Doesn't even take time to get there. It's just instant. So when we're offering trainings on these topics, I think that the individuals have to be making sure that they're presenting them and just it's factual. And this is what we're dealing with without bringing any sort of already basically a bias to the training themselves about and who they're training. And that's just my thoughts and input going forward. I think the NCSL, I've been in many of their trainings, both as a representative and as a leadership trainings. And I think they're always well done, even on, very heated, sensitive topics. I think they can do a very good job. I agree with you, Speaker, that we need to make sure we could try to get them into the same training program. If we could have, it done at the same time. It is hard to get members, but it's hard to get members because of their experience of previous trainings, at least from my perspective with certainly the members that I've dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think Amy would be a good person as well, just because obviously the Maine Human Rights Commission has dealt with real life examples of where this has happened in workplaces and can probably bring those examples to the table as here are real. Yeah, I think sometimes it's too theoretical and not necessarily in application. Like, here are some examples, and obviously I don't know to the extent Amy is able to disclose names and places of employment or whatever, but real life examples of here is how this concept has actually played out in a workplace, and these are the things that we all need to be aware of, that this is not happening in our workplaces. So yeah, I think NCSL is obviously a great resource, and I think the Maine Human Rights Commission covering the racial harassment portion of the training would be good. So I would seek a motion to approve NCSL to cover general harassment and sexual harassment, and then Maine Human Rights Commission to co-present and cover the racial harassment portion.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second by President Jackson. Any discussion on the motion? No. Okay. And I would say I would really, really strongly encourage that we figure out how to make sure those two things that the presentations happen at the same time. So I'm sure that won't be a problem. I suspect Amy will be willing to coordinate with NCSL to make it happen. So great. All those in favor? Unanimous of those present. Thank you. And then the final item on the agenda is item number 7, planned remote work policy for nonpartisan staff. And this is informational. Starts on page 13 of, and just as a point of clarity, I know there was a note on the sexual harassment, general harassment, racial harassment training, a note that Legislative Council has now defined in-person to include electronic participation methods like Zoom. Obviously, I think we're all fine keeping that moving forward. If people want to participate in the training via Zoom, I don't see any issues with that. Any objections? No. Great. Approved by implication. The planned remote work policy for nonpartisan legislative offices begins on page 13, outlines extensively the policies for these offices. Suzanne, is there anything you want to make council aware of, or the personnel committee aware of, as it relates to this policy? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, there is. our goal here is to make the remote work that is experienced by the nonpartisan legislative offices, it's to make it invisible to the legislature. So in the same way that during the pandemic, we spread out, we had some people be remote, the paramount issue was to be present for the legislature and to get the work done. And our goal was for you not to notice if some people were home, to spread out. That same feeling carries through to this. The paramount goal is the operational needs of the legislature. So if this is done correctly, you will not notice. This policy would leave a great deal, just about everything, up to the particular office director. It specifies that there has to be core coverage. There has to be people in this building during the normal working hours. It doesn't mean that everyone has to be in this building during the normal working hours, but currently, and this may change over time, but currently people rely on being able to stop into an office to get information. As long as legislators and the public and lobbyists and whomever our customers are rely on the ability to stop in and ask questions and have people here, we intend to have people here. So this is very long, but the point of it is to ensure that none of it is noticed by the members, because the most important thing is the legislative work.
Great. Any questions from personnel on the policy? I just want to extend a thanks for taking the time to so thoroughly review. I mean, it seems like just not that I would expect anything less, but like the detail included in this is pretty impressive, and I appreciate. I know the staff of the offices appreciate the thoughtfulness of about how to balance the remote work with the in-person, and making sure that we don't lose a step in the important work that's being done in this branch. So really appreciate that. Great. Well, seeing no other questions, that I believe was the final item on our agenda. And I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Representative Jackson, seconded by Representative Dillingham. All those in favor? Unanimous of those present. Thank you very much. That concludes the Personnel Committee meeting. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye.